We all want to be happy, and there are many books and teachers in the world that try to help people be happier. Yet we all continue to suffer. Therefore, we may think that we are doing it wrong. Somehow we are failing at happiness. But that isn't true. Being able to enjoy happiness doesn't require that we have zero suffering. In fact, the art of happiness is also the art of suffering as well. When we learn to acknowledge, embrace, and understand our suffering, we suffer much less. Not only that, but we're also able to go further and transform our suffering into understanding, compassion, and joy for ourselves and for others. One of the most difficult things for us to accept is that there is no realm where there's only happiness and there's no suffering. This doesn't mean that we should despair. Suffering can be transformed. As soon as we open our mouth to say suffering, we know that the opposite of suffering is already there as well. Where there is suffering, there is happiness. According to the creation story in the biblical book of Genesis, God said, "Let there be light." I like to imagine that light replied, saying, "God, I have to wait for my twin brother, darkness, to be with me. I can't be there without darkness." God asked, "Why do you need to wait? Darkness is there." Light answered, "In that case, then I am also already there. If we focus exclusively on pursuing happiness, we may regard suffering as something to be ignored or resisted. We think of it as something that gets in the way of happiness. But the art of happiness is also, and at the same time, the art of knowing how to suffer well. If we know how to use our suffering, we can transform it and suffer much less. Knowing how to suffer well is essentially to realizing true happiness. Suffering and the happiness are not separate. When we suffer, we tend to think that suffering is all there is in that moment, and happiness belongs to some other time or place. People often ask, "Why do I have to suffer?" Thinking we should be able to have a life without any suffering is as diluted as thinking we should be able to have a left side without a right side. The same is true of thinking we have a life in which no happiness whatsoever is to be found. If the left says, "Right, you have to go away. I don't want you. I only want the left," that's nonsense, because then the left would have to stop existing as well. If there's no right, then there's no left. Where there is no suffering, there can be no happiness either, and vice versa. We can learn to see and skillfully engage with both the presence of happiness and the presence of suffering. We will go in the direction of enjoying life more. Every day we go a little farther in that direction, and eventually we realize that suffering and happiness are not two separate things. Cold air can be painful if you aren't wearing enough warm clothes, but when you're feeling overheated or you're walking outside with proper clothing, the bracing sensation of cold air can be a source of feeling joy and aliveness. Suffering isn't some kind of external, objective source of oppression and pain. Let's say that one again. Suffering isn't some kind of external, objective source of oppression and pain. There might be things that cause you to suffer, such as loud music or bright lights, which may bring other people joy. There are things that bring you joy that annoy other people. The rainy day that ruins your plans for a picnic is a boon for the farmer whose field is parched. Happiness is possible right now, today. But happiness cannot be without suffering. Some people think that in order to be happy, they must avoid all suffering, and so they are constantly vigilant, constantly worrying. They end up sacrificing all their spontaneity, freedom, and joy. This isn't correct. If you can recognize and accept your pain without running away from it, you will discover that although pain is there, joy can also be there at the same time. Some say that suffering is only an illusion, or that to live wisely, we have to transcend both suffering and joy. I say the opposite. The way to suffer well and be happy is to stay in touch with what is actually going on. In doing so, you will gain liberating insights into the true nature of suffering and joy. No mud, no lotus. Both suffering and happiness are of an organic nature, which means they are both transitory. They are always changing. The flower, when it wilts, becomes the compost. The compost can help the flowers again. Happiness is also organic and impermanent by nature. It can become suffering, and suffering can become happiness again. If you look deeply into a flower, you see that the flower is made only of non-flower elements. In that flower, there is a cloud. Of course, we know a cloud isn't a flower, but without a cloud, a flower can't be. If there's no cloud, there's no rain, and no flower can grow. You don't have to be a dreamer to see a cloud floating in a flower. It's already there. The sunlight is also there. Sunlight isn't flower, but without sunlight, no flower is possible. We continue to look deeply into the flower. We see many other things like the earth and the minerals. Without them, a flower cannot be. So it's a fact that the flower is made only of non-flower elements. A flower can't be herself alone. A flower can only interbe with everything else. You can't remove the sunlight, the soil, the cloud from the flower. In each of our Plum Village practice centers, Thich, Nhat, Hanh, around the world, we have a lotus pond. Everyone knows we need to have mud for lotuses to grow. The mud doesn't smell good, but the lotus flower smells very good. If you don't have mud, the lotus won't manifest. You can't grow lotus flowers on marble. Without mud, there can be no lotus. It is possible, of course, to get stuck in the mud of life. It's easy enough to notice mud all over you at times. The hardest thing to practice is not allowing yourself to be overwhelmed by despair. When you're overwhelmed by despair, all you can see is suffering everywhere you look. You feel as if the worst thing is happening to you, but we must remember that suffering is a kind of mud that we need in order to generate joy and happiness. Without suffering, there is no happiness. So we shouldn't discriminate against the mud. We have to learn how to embrace and cradle our own suffering and the suffering of the world with a lot of tenderness. When I lived in Vietnam during the war, it was difficult to see our way through the dark and heavy mud. It seemed like the destruction would just go on and on forever. Every day people would ask me if I thought the war would end soon. But it was very difficult to answer because there was no end in sight. But I knew if I said, I don't know, that would only water their seeds of despair. So when people asked me that question, I replied, everything is impermanent, even war. It will someday end. Knowing that, we could continue to work for peace, and indeed the war did end. Now the former mortal enemies are busily trading and touring back and forth, and people throughout the world enjoy practicing our traditions, teachings on mindfulness and peace. If you know how to make good use of the mud, you can grow beautiful lotuses. If you know how to make good use of suffering, you can produce happiness. We do need some suffering to make happiness possible, and most of us have enough suffering inside and around us to be able to do that. We don't have to create more. Did the Buddha suffer? When I was a young monk, I believed that the Buddha didn't suffer once he had become enlightened. Naively, I asked myself, what's the use of becoming a Buddha if you continue to suffer? The Buddha did suffer because he had a body, feelings, and perceptions like all of us. Sometimes he probably had a headache. Sometimes he suffered from rheumatism. If he happened to eat something not well cooked, then he had intestinal problems. So he suffered physically and he suffered emotionally as well. When one of his beloved students died, he suffered. How can you not suffer when a dear friend has just died? The Buddha wasn't a stone. He was a human being, but because he had a lot of insight, wisdom, and compassion, he knew how to suffer, and he suffered much less. The Four Noble Truths. The very first teaching the Buddha gave after his enlightenment was about suffering. It's called the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths are: there is suffering, there is a course of action that generates suffering, suffering ceases, and there is a course of action leading to the cessation of suffering, the arising of happiness. When you first hear that suffering is a noble truth, you might wonder what's so noble about suffering. The Buddha was saying that if we can recognize suffering, and if we embrace it and look deeply into its roots, then we'll be able to let go of the habits that feed it, and at the same time find a way of happiness, a way to happiness. Suffering has its beneficial aspects. It can be an excellent teacher. What is suffering made of? There is suffering of the body, including the sensations of pain, illness, hunger, and physical injury. Some of this suffering is simply unavoidable. Then there is the suffering of the mind, including anxiety, jealousy, despair, fear, anger. We have the seeds, the potential in us for understanding, love, compassion, and insight, as well as the seeds of anger, hate, and greed. While we can't avoid all the suffering in life, we can suffer much less by watering the seeds of suffering, by not watering the seeds inside us of suffering. Are you at war with your body? Do you neglect or punish your body? Have you truly gotten to know your body? Can you feel at home with your body? Suffering can either be physically or mentally, or both, but every kind of suffering manifests somewhere in the body and creates tension and stress. We are told that we should release the tension in our body. Many of us have tried very hard. We want to release the tension in our body, but we can't release it. Our attempts at reducing tension in us won't work unless we first acknowledge that it's there. When you cut your finger, you just wash it and your body knows to heal. When a non-human animal living in the forest is injured, she knows what to do. She stops searching for something to eat or looking for a mate. She knows through generations of ancestral knowledge that it's not good for her to do so. She finds a quiet place and just lays down, doing nothing. Non-human animals instinctively know that stopping is the best way to get healed. They don't need a doctor, a drugstore, or a pharmacist. We human beings used to have this kind of wisdom, but we have lost touch with it. We don't know how to rest anymore. We don't allow the body to rest, to release the tension and heal. We rely almost entirely on medication to deal with sickness and pain. Yet the most effective ways to ease and transform our suffering are already available to us without any prescription and at no financial cost. I'm not suggesting that you should throw away all your medications. Some of us do need to use certain medicines, but we can sometimes use them in smaller quantities and to a much greater effect when we know how to let our body and mind truly rest. Healing medicine. The main affliction of our modern civilizations is that we don't know how to handle the suffering inside us, and we try to cover it up with all kinds of consumption. Retailers peddle a plethora of classic and novel devices to help us cover up the suffering inside. But unless and until we're able to face our suffering, we can't be present and available to life, and happiness will continue to elude us. There are many people who have enormous suffering and don't know how to handle it. For many people, it starts already at a very young age. So why don't schools teach our young people the way to manage suffering? If a student is very unhappy and he can't concentrate and he can't learn, the suffering of each of us affects others. The more we learn about the art of suffering well, the less suffering there will be in the world. Mindfulness is the best way to be with our suffering without being overwhelmed by it. Mindfulness is the capacity to dwell in the present moment, to know what's happening in the here and now. For example, when we're lifting our two arms, we're conscious of the fact that we're lifting our arms. Our mind is with our lifting of our arms, and we don't think about the past or the future because lifting our arms is what's happening in the present moment. To be mindful means to be aware. It's the energy that knows what is happening in the present moment. Lifting our arms and knowing that we're lifting our arms, that's mindfulness. Mindfulness of our action. When we breathe in and we know we're breathing in, that's mindfulness. When we make a step and we know that the steps are taking place, we are mindful of the steps. Mindfulness is always mindfulness of something. It's the energy that helps us be aware of what is happening right now and right here in our body, in our feelings, in our perceptions, and around us. With mindfulness, you can recognize the presence of the suffering in you and in the world, and it's with the same energy that you tenderly embrace the suffering. By being aware of your in-breath and out-breath, you generate the energy of mindfulness, so you can continue to cradle the suffering. Practitioners of mindfulness can help support each other in recognizing, embracing, and transforming suffering. With mindfulness, we are no longer afraid of pain. We can even go further and make good use of suffering to generate the energy of understanding and compassion that heals us, and we can help others to heal and be happy as well. Generating mindfulness. The way we start producing the medicine of mindfulness is by stopping and taking a conscious breath, giving our complete attention to our in-breath and our out-breath. When we stop and take a breath in this way, we unite body and mind and come back home to ourselves. We feel our bodies more fully. We are truly alive only when the mind is with the body. The great news is that oneness of body and mind can be realized just by one in-breath. Maybe we have not been kind enough to our body for some time. Recognizing the tension, the pain, the stress in our body, we can bathe it in our mindfulness, mindful awareness. And that is the beginning of healing. If we take care of the suffering inside us, we have more clarity, energy, and strength to help address the suffering, violence, poverty, and inequity of our loved ones, as well as the suffering of our community and the world. If, however, we are preoccupied with the fear and despair in us, we can't help remove the suffering of others. There is an art to suffering well. If we know how to take care of our suffering, we not only suffer much, much less, but we also create more happiness around us and in the world. That is the first section of No Mud, No Lotus. We are going to continue again in the next video. So please hang around, like, subscribe, all the things if you want to, if you would like to hear the rest of the book. We will be back soon. Thank you.